Hello everyone, this is Ashley Tucker. Thank you for joining me today. I'm back again this week doing another video for My Favorite Things, and I'm joining them for their weekly sketch challenge. Now, if you don't know what that is, every Wednesday My Favorite Things has their sketch challenge and they release a sketch. This is this week's sketch. And then you can use that sketch for inspiration to make a card. And once you have a card, you can take a photo of it and upload the photo to their blog for a chance to win a $50 gift certificate to their website. It's a really great way to make some cards, especially if you're struggling with coming up with your ideas. For my card this week, I decided to follow that inspiration sketch pretty closely. I was really excited to pull out this new stamp set called Aurorable Friends, which has all these really cute dinosaurs. I picked out this cute little guy and I stamped him with Gina Designs Jet Black Amalgam ink onto some Neenah Classic Crest Solar White cardstock, and I'm coloring him in with my Prismacolor pencils. I'm using a very simple coloring technique here, and I think that anybody could color like this as long as they're patient. And when I say patient, I mean you really need to slow it down and take your time with your coloring. I'm actually going really slow with this coloring so that I do a nice job. I actually have this video sped up to ×2 the speed, so that should let you know how slow I was going with this coloring. The key to this coloring technique is a gentle touch. You want your pencil tip to barely kiss the paper. I think that a lot of people who struggle with coloring with colored pencils, the problem is either the amount of pressure they're using or the quality of the pencil. With a pencil like the Prismacolor pencils, you really want to use a gentle pressure and slowly build up the color by adding more layers. Another thing that I want to point out with the technique that I'm using is I'm moving the pencil tip on the paper in these tiny circular motions, and this really helps to hide your pencil marks and gives you a smoother overall look to the coloring. Once I finished with the first layer of color, I used the same exact colored pencil and started to add a second layer of color, and this really builds up the color for some shading. And it's important to note that for this second layer of color, I'm not pressing down any harder on the pencil. I'm still using that very gentle touch. And you can see how even though this is the same exact colored pencil, I'm getting a darker shade of the color. I do want to add that this technique is not going to work with all colored pencils equally, especially lower quality colored pencils. You will find that it is a little bit harder to add layers of color. Once I finished with that shading, I picked out a new colored pencil. This one is a little bit darker of a blue than the first color. The first color was PC19 and this one is PC903. And I made sure that this pencil had a really nice sharp tip. I then very carefully traced along the stamped line on the underside of the dinosaur. This is a really small detail, but I love what it did for the look of the shading. The next pencil that I picked out is PC901, which is a really deep indigo blue, and I'm going to be using that for the stripes along the back of the dinosaur. Now I'm coloring in these stripes exactly the same way that I colored in the body on the dinosaur. I'm using those circular motions and I'm using a very gentle touch. Once I finished adding the first layer of coloring to the stripes, I went back in with a second layer to deepen up some of the color and add some shading. And then I wanted to take it even further, so I added a third layer of the color. Alright, so if you take a look at this stamp, you'll see that there's these little marks along the back of the neck by the head. I took these marks as a guide for some more shading, and I took that same indigo blue color and I very lightly shaded that area. And I think that that's a very nice added detail. I also went over the eyes with this color, but I kind of wish I didn't do that. I don't think it really adds to the image. The last thing that I needed to color were the tiny little toes, and for that I took a gray pencil and I just added a bit of shading because I want them to be mostly white. With that, the coloring is all done, so I grabbed the coordinating die and carefully lined it up. Once it was lined up, I used a little piece of Post-it tape in order to hold it in place so that I could run it through my die cutting machine. While I had my die cutting machine out, I took a panel of A2 size white cardstock and I placed a circle die on top of that and cut it out so that it's kind of hanging off of the edge a little bit. I then took a slightly smaller circle die. By the way, these circle dies are from the Hero Arts Nested Circle die set, and I placed that circle on a piece of lipstick red cardstock and I ran that through my die cutting machine as well. If you know in advance all of the die cutting that needs to be done for your card, I think it's usually better to try to do it all at the same time. I have this small scrap of orange peel cardstock, which I'm adhering onto my card base with my tape runner. I then took the panel of red cardstock, which I die cut the circle out of, and I added a bunch of foam tape to the back of that and carefully lined it up onto the card base so that that orange peel cardstock is showing through the circle. It looks a little funny at this point, but it will all come together. I took the dinosaur that I colored in and I added some foam tape to the back of him where it's going to be on the circle, and I added a little liquid adhesive to the tail where it's on the red cardstock, and then I adhered it to the card. You'll see that I do have a strip of foam tape along the top of the card so that that area matches the height of the red cardstock. I then added even more foam tape behind the white panel and I popped that up onto the card as well. For my sentiment, I picked out one of the stamps from the Aurorable Friends stamp set and I stamped it with Versamark ink onto some In the Navy cardstock from Gina Designs, and then I embossed it with a white embossing powder. I cut that down into a strip, added some liquid adhesive to the back, and then I very carefully lined it up onto the card so that it's kind of peeking out behind that top layer. I always like to use a white gel pen to add some highlights to my colored in images. Now, normally I work with Copic markers, but you can do the same thing with colored pencils. The last thing that I did to finish this card is I placed it in my Misti so that it's opened up, and I stamped a sentiment on the inside of the card which says RAR, and I thought that that went really well with the sentiment on the front of the card. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope you really enjoyed this card design and that it gave you some inspiration. If you did like this card and you want to check out any of the supplies that I used, I will have all the links in the description down below, as well as a link to the MFT blog where you can check out the sketch challenge. Again, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.